Hello, BookTube. What's Friday? I've reached the end of another grueling week at the box factory, and that's time for Friday Reads. I had errands to do today. I had to go out for a bit, and part of my day intersected with a group of muscular teenagers, of course. And at one point, we were on the subway, crowded subway car, and they were sitting and they were behaving, and I was talking with them about their week and what's going on in their mind, and then a muscular teenager at the other end of the subway car, one that did not belong to me, was not supervised, reached up to the metal crossbar where the straps used to be on a subway and proceeded to start doing pull-ups, only they were chair pull-ups, so where you have you're pulling up your whole body weight, but you have your legs, your knees up and your legs down. So it looks like you're sitting on a chair and you're pulling yourself up and down in that position, keeping your legs up and your knees bent. And the minute my boys saw him do that, I looked at them just as the idea was crossing their iPhone-addled little brains and said, "Don't you dare." And they all started doing that. So we had 4 young men doing that on the subway and making a contest, of course, out of seeing how many stops they could do it for before they got tired. But aside from the intense embarrassment of that, I had a fine day, a fine bookish day. And now I want to tell you about what I'll be doing this weekend, which is, surprise, surprise, reading. I got in a very nice, luxuriously deep nap earlier today. So I'm not planning on sleeping this weekend, which means that I have 72 hours to play around with. And if I generously estimate that 12 of those hours will go to non-bookish things, then I intend to read for the other 60 hours. So that's why this list of books is not very big. It could be much bigger. I am leaving room for late editions. If I go book shopping this weekend, then I might. One of the fun things about book shopping, I don't usually do it because I get lots of books in the mail. But one of the nice fun things about it is that when I book shop, I like to immediately prioritize the things I get rather than just toss them on a pile. Part of the fun of book shopping is to read right away, at least some of the things I get. So I'm leaving room. But that still leaves us with a pile of books that I want to show you. And I don't think we've seen any of them on this channel before. We're going to start off with 2 rereads, rereads. The first one is this lovely picador paperback of A Rumor of War by Philip Caputo. This is the 40th anniversary of this. It's a classic first-hand account of, I think he spent 16 months in and around Da Nang in 1977, came home and wrote this book, and was immediately recognized as a classic of war literature and has been recognized and taught as that ever since. And I don't think I've read it in decades. So I'm very happy to have this. Glad to get a new reprint. So that will be it'll be a reread. And then the next thing is also a reread, but of a delightfully new kind, because it's an expanded book. I read the original book when it came out, probably 30 years ago. And it's by the late, great Ursula Le Guin, who just recently died. And this is her latest volume in the Library of America. And she worked with the editors at the Library of America before she died on this. This is Always Coming Home, only it's an expanded version. It's never before seen print in this format. There was a book years ago. This is sort of the mytho-history, the ethnography of the Kesh, the post-apocalyptic inhabitants of post-apocalyptic California, that she imagined they populate some of her books, and here she decided to create their world. So it's snippets and recipes and poems and songs and also a couple of much longer narratives all about the Kesh. It's a weird thing to do. I don't know of many examples like it. And it's going to be wonderful. I mean, a little poignant, but also wonderful to read a version of this book that I haven't read before. So that technically counts as a reread, but not really. And then we'll do a bunch of mysteries and thrillers. You know, I love my mysteries and thrillers. Just love them. In fact, I love them so much that you may be wondering if I'm going to take part in March Mystery Madness here on BookTube for 2019, the way I did in 2018. I think there's a strong possibility that I will. But in the meantime, the publishing world doesn't wait until March, so I have a bunch of mysteries I want to show you. We'll start with this one. We may have seen the advanced copy of this on this channel. This is The Reckoning by Ursa Sigurdsdottir. A woman in, looks like Iowa. It's a woman in deep snow, but with the paper peeling off for us to see. Kind of an intriguing cover design, although under no circumstances whatsoever should a publisher ever allow any author of any kind to name a book The Reckoning. There should just be a permanent moratorium on the use of such a title. The title is unbelievably hackneyed and is the title of at least 350 books in the last 2 years alone. So I would have retired it. I'd be willing to bet that when I read this book, I will come up off the top of my head unbidden with a string of better titles than The Reckoning, which tells you nothing. But what have we got here? Let me tell you about it. A chilling note predicting the deaths of 6 people is found in a school's time capsule 10 years after it was buried. But surely, if a 13-year-old wrote it, it can't be a real threat. Detective Huldar suspects he's been given the investigation simply to keep him away from real police work. He turns to psychologist Freya to help understand the child who hid the message. Soon, however, they find themselves at the heart of another shocking case as the discovery of the letter coincides with a string of macabre events. Body parts found in a garden, followed by the murder of a man who owned the house. His initials are BT, one of the names predicted on the note. And this author wrote a previous book called The Legacy, also should be completely embargoed as the title of a book. You should never call a book The Legacy or The Reckoning. And there's, I'm sure you could come up with a list. There's a short but ironclad list of other titles that a book should just never have anymore. But I remember really liking the first time I read this author, so I'm looking forward to this. This is the finished copy. Then what have we got? A couple of thrillers? Yes, this is a thriller by Kelly Armstrong. This is a Rockton novel, The Watcher in the Woods. The secret of Rockton has seen some the secret town of Rockton has seen some rocky times lately. Understandable considering its mix of criminals and victims fleeing society for refuge within its Yukon borders. Remember this? We saw the last entry in this. It's a town that has deliberately taken itself completely off the grid in order to shelter people who don't have anywhere else to go. Casey Duncan, the town's only detective on a police force of 3, has already faced murder, arson, and falling in love in the several months she's lived there. Yet even she didn't think it would be possible for an outsider to locate the town and cause trouble in the place she's come to call home. When a U.S. Marshal shows up demanding the release of one of the residents, but won't say who, Casey and her boyfriend, Sheriff Eric Dalton, are skeptical. Yet only hours later, the Marshal is shot dead, and the only possible suspects are the townspeople. So I remember liking, totally implausible, but I remember liking the first volume, so I'll gladly read this next one. And then this next one, I don't think I have a pub sheet for it. Don't think it really needs one. This is Connections in Death by J.D. Robb. This is, I think, the 375th entry in the In Death series. I don't know how much we need to know about it. Some of you may remember I think the first book in this series back in was it the Regency period? I believe that the Prince Regent was in charge in England. I think it was President Grant who was president in America. But back it was the Grant or one of those Tammany Hall American presidencies that Naked in Death appeared. That was the first one. It came out as 3 volumes in hardcover at Moody's. Do you remember that? Had to check it out. It was the talk of the town. And ever since then, once every year, J.D. Robb has been writing an in-death book. Connections in Death, Marzipan in Death, Al Gore invented the internet in Death. Just one after another every year for the last 161 years. And this is the latest one. Doesn't really matter what the plot is. Well, let's see. Homicide cop Eve Dallas and her husband Rourke are putting a portion of their billions toward building a brand new school and youth shelter. Both Eve and Rourke know all too well how the hard life of kids can lead to dangerous crossroads, and with this new project they hope to nudge a few more of them onto the right path. For expert help, they've hired the talented and passionate child psychologist Dr. Rochelle Pickering, whose only brother pulled himself up out of a spiral of addiction and crime with Rochelle's support. Lyle is living with Rochelle temporarily while he gets his life together, and he's thrilled for his sister when she tells him about Rourke's job offer. But within hours, a triumph is followed by tragedy. Returning from a celebratory dinner with her boyfriend, Rochelle finds Lyle dead with a syringe in his lap. Eve's investigation quickly confirms that this wasn't just another OD. After all his work to get clean, Lyle has been pumped full of poison, and a neighbor with a peephole reports seeing a scruffy, pink-haired girl fleeing the scene. As you can see, this series has kept up with the times, since there were no ODs and there were no pink-haired girls when the first book appeared in the 1870s. So it's just kept going from there. It will outlive us all, but you can't miss an in-death novel. So I'll be reading that, and then this next one, a series I absolutely love. I've reviewed many of them. I read them all. I dote on them, and I'm also, a little bit biased on the subject. This is the new Donna Leon. Unto Us a Son is Given. This is an Inspector Brunetti novel set, as you can see, in Venice. There is St. Mark's, and these are famous. I mean, this is also a very long-running series. Brunetti has been solving crimes in Venice for 30 years. There are tours, guided tours, Donna Leon tours that you can take in Venice. These books are phenomenally popular, both there and here in America. And I love them. I think that popularity is deserved. They are deceptive. They're light. They seem light on the surface, but they are wonderful. And this is the latest one, and I haven't got to it, so I will be correcting that this weekend. And that's it for murder mysteries. Then we have a novel of some kind. It's next on my agenda, so we'll find out about it together here. This is by Charles Cumming, and it is The Moroccan Girl. Isn't that pretty? The Moroccan Girl. An evocative tale of deception, international suspense, and romance. Oh, so it's going to be a mystery thriller, too. So they are all going to be together. Let's see here. It brings the classic spy story into our current contentious political era. Sorry. I keep thinking of that. It's become a meme now. I keep thinking of that plaintive tweet from last year. A reporter went on Twitter and said, I worked on this story for 16 months. I sweated over it late nights, and he just tweeted it out. I don't know what the state of espionage is in the 2019. Lara Bartok is an enigmatic figure associated with a revolutionary movement called Resurrection, which has been targeting authoritarian-leaning talking heads around the world, merely harassing them at first, but then moving into kidnapping and murder. When Resurrection's leader is killed, Lara vanishes, and several competing intelligence agencies set out to find her. Author Kit Carradine, after accepting an invitation to a literary conference in Morocco, is approached by the British Secret Service to request to carry out a mission. Lara Bartok is believed to be in Marrakesh, and the UK's spy masters would like to get a message to her as discreetly as possible. Feeling a connection to previous writers who served their country as spies, Kit jumps at the chance to live the kind of life he's previously only written about. Oh, that sounds wonderful. This sounds wonderful. I didn't know. I had no idea. I sort of thought it was kind of an exotic literary novel, a literary novel, but it's not. It's an international crime caper. Oh, wonderful. All right. Well, it goes in well with all those others. I did not know that. And then we'll do some nonfiction to wrap things up. But this is not the end. I may do an update, in fact, on Sunday, because I'm going to read a lot more than this weekend. And I have a feeling that I'm going to come into a lot more books in the course of the weekend. So they will probably jump right to the head of the queue. But this next one is bound to get Steve's blood pressure up and cause the old agita. This is Michael Nelson, and this is Trump, the First 2 Years. It's from a small press, and this is a legitimate historian who wrote a book called Trump, the First Year that I read. And that this author is extremely low-key. But his publishers, the publicist, pumped up the book as being finally an account of Trump where the author takes a step back and looks at him dispassionately as a historian. And of course, that was the Fire and Fury time, Michael Wolff. That was all sorts of tell-alls, including Omarosa's. So in some circles, in academic circles, it seemed like that was needed. But you really need someone to take a step back and look at what's actually going on here without the inflammatory rhetoric. And this is a follow-up. This is the second, Trump's second year. But it starts with the election, so it will cover a lot of ground. I'm actually, I liked the first book. It drove me crazy, and I know this book's going to drive me crazy too. But the author is undeniably talented and even eloquent. I noticed that in the first one. I expect it to happen in the second one. What I'm hoping is that the author has a plan to make a great big book on the Trump administration out of all these books. I would like that very much if they continue to be as good. We'll see what this next one is like. The reason why I know it will infuriate me is because the underlying endeavor of taking an objective step back and just talking about policy and whatnot with the Trump administration, that underlying endeavor is deceptive. It shouldn't be something that historians want to do because the inflammatory rhetoric is part of the story. It's not a distortion, as it would be in the partisan football politics of other presidents. In this case, the inflammatory rhetoric is coming first and foremost from the president. Lies, a fountain, a geyser, a police fire hose of lies every day. Easily verifiable. Intelligence chiefs get in front of Congress, give sworn testimony with 1,000 cameras running, and later the same day, the president says it's all fake news. They don't really mean it. So that this guy is telling his followers, if there are any of them left, he's telling his followers that all of those people, the heads of all his intelligence agencies, were willing to commit perjury on camera, a crime for which they could go to jail for the rest of their lives, and that he knows they did that, even if they deny it. It's just, that kind of thing is not partisan football playing. That's necessary for a historian to write about, because this is not like any other presidency. That's part of it, baked in. And if you think, well, I'm better serving dispassionate objective history to take a step back from all that, then you're taking a step back not only from one of the fundamental characteristics of this presidency, but also from one of its fundamental dangers. Because this guy isn't kidding around. He doesn't like the fact that there are any limits on his power. He doesn't like the fact that reality does not comport with his inner narrative of what that reality wants to be. He would prefer it if that weren't true, and he laps up the fact that he has followers who would rather believe his version of what he tweets than what they can see with their own eyes. He has followers who will follow him no matter what. If he tells them the sun is not in the sky, then they will look at it and say, well, you know what Donald says. That's important. That's not partisan football playing. That's part of the story. And I was foaming at the mouth just like this when I launched into the first book. And I know that I'm going to feel the same way with this one, but this guy is so good that I'm going to grant him a lot of that. And maybe some of that is actually a necessary corrective. So I am fated to read all of these books. I thought at first in 2016 that I would just steer clear of it completely, and then an editor asked me to write about some of them for money, and that got me hooked. And BookTube. I know you don't go to this channel for politics, so I'll shut up about it. But I have to say, if I considered it my duty as both an American and a due-paying citizen of the Republic of Letters, if I considered it my duty to read every single book on an intelligent, eloquent, Nobel Prize-winning, 2-term president, then all of that still applies to his racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron of a successor. All of that still applies. You're either in or you're not. And it would be totally wrong, I think, a total abrogation of everything that I stand for as a reader, for me to say, well, I'm not going to read any of these books. because they irritate me. If I was willing to read them when they made me proud, it's all the story of America. So anyway, you don't care. Anyway, that's why I'm reading all of these things. And this one, I think, will be fairly painless, whereas some of the ones that I've read this week, oh my God, they were not painless. They were extremely painful. I'll be writing about them, so you'll get to see what I mean. And then the last book on my Friday reads here is an absolute treat, because of the author. Although it's Monument Man, The Life and Art of Daniel Chester French, Massachusetts' own Daniel Chester French, who was a great and prolific public sculptor of the time we don't have anymore, and who did a lot of things. If you've touched the toe of John Harvard in Harvard University, then you know his work. But most of all, you know his work from the Lincoln Memorial. He was the sculptor of the statue, the haunting, unbelievably profound statue of Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial, where you have seen it. And you have read pictures, you've read accounts of it and whatnot. And none of that prepares you when you go there, especially the first time. When you go there, and you walk up those steps and you stand in front of that statue, you will be prepared to be moved, and it will move you more anyway. It's an amazing work, and you could do a whole book on it. In fact, whole books have been done on it. But as far as I know, there has never been a really good, critical, full-length biography of French. Considering that he did one of the indelible icons of American culture, you would think that'd be amazing. But I'm racking my brains, and I don't remember ever reading one, and I would have. But the main draw, so that's a draw for this book anyway, is that it's a biography. First of all, you all know I love biographies more than any other kind of book. It's a biography of someone who badly needs one, which is a drum that I bang on this channel all the time. And also, Harold Hoser is a fantastic writer. I'm a little bit surprised that he's writing this kind of a book because he is our greatest living writer about Abraham Lincoln. And this is about a guy who did a statue of Abraham Lincoln. It's not quite the same, but oh my God, his books on Abraham Lincoln, you must not miss them. If you like the subject of Lincoln, and you'll notice, I go on all the time on this channel when I think that a subject has been overwritten. Napoleon comes to mind. Hitler comes to mind. You'll notice I've never said that about Lincoln, and that's because there is a true poignancy, a true bottomless depth, not only to the man and the contradictions of the man, but also to the time, president of a country during a civil war, that I think is pretty much inexhaustible. And he draws out such great writing in the people who write about him, including a historical novel that's coming up later in the year that I read, and it's fantastic. It's one of the best things the author's ever done. I can't wait to talk about it with you. I will wait to talk about it with you. But Harold Hoser is in all of those ranks of people writing about Lincoln and doing great work. He is the one who does the best work. Just an amazing, unassuming guy, a fantastic scholar, and a great writer. He did a book on Lincoln and the Power of the Press. He did a whole book, a big book, twice this size, on President-elect Lincoln, on Lincoln during the time after he was elected president, but before he took office. Can you imagine that such a thing wouldn't be just the most boring, dry monograph in the world? And yet it's incredibly good. One of the best books about Lincoln. I think it's called President-elect Lincoln, but one way or another, if you have any of this guy's books on Lincoln in your library, get them. You're going to love them if you've missed him somehow. And you might want to ask your library to get this book. I mean, I'm talking libraries here. I'm just assuming this is grotesquely expensive. Yeah, it's $35. So if you have... Oh, there's our guy. There's our guy right there. Kindly turn your eyes away from the muscular tuchus booktube. Kindly get your mind out of the gutter and pay attention to our profound artist, if you would. I can't take you people anywhere. But if you have the $35, lurking around, this will be worth it. I haven't read it yet, but I can wholeheartedly recommend this author. There's no chance this book will disappoint, unless a piano fell on his head. There's no chance that this will disappoint. So this is I'm going on at 5 times the length because this is my bailiwick. Although I'm sure I will like some of these murder mysteries. I'm sure that I will. I love them. I pop them down like candy. So there you go. That is Friday Reads. We can pretty much call it only Friday. Some of these murder mysteries are going to only take an hour apiece. I'm going to read all night long. It's entirely possible that by lunchtime tomorrow, I will have all of this done. The Philip Caputo is a reread. That will be fast. The Ursula Le Guin is a reread, although I will savor it. That will be fast. It's entirely possible that there'll be a lot more reading this weekend, and I will keep you updated if there is. But Monument Men is one of the books. It's not a reread, and yet I can recommend it more strongly than almost anything else here. Sight unseen. That's how good this author is. And then, I have a feeling I'm going to end up recommending this book too, no matter how much it infuriates me. This is Trump, the second year. Then look at this. This is lovely. The Moroccan Girl by Charles Cumming. Turns out it's an international thriller. Did not expect that. The Reckoning, set in frigid Iowa. I think it's set somewhere else. Then The Watcher in the Woods, about a town that's off the grid, full of people who are natural suspects in any murder. So a fruitful idea. Then Connections in Death, which is Daniel French really, really liked the In Death series, but so did Lincoln. So we're coming full circle, as the English majors like to say. And then Unto Us a Child is Given, by Donna Leon, her latest Venice murder mystery. You never want, if you're a fan of hers, you never want to miss a book because they're always good. And there you go. I did not realize this was such a colorful Friday reads. Oh, did I leave out? Oh, I did. I've left out. Oh my God, it gets even better. I left out Rumor of War. Indispensable reading. You don't have to read the 40th anniversary edition, but if you haven't read A Rumor of War, you really need to. And Always Coming Home. In a Library of America edition, an expanded Library of America edition. There are drawings in there, there are poems in there, it's all sorts of stuff. So it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to dig into this reading almost immediately. So I will report back. Thank you, Book 2.